back to the talk that keeps America moving. This is Road Gang Radio. So let's rejoin your host, Jimmy Mack, live from the Big Easy.
It didn't take a request from my wife. I had actually walked away from that a long time ago. We've got some good friends of the show who are actually gun enthusiasts who have made the decision to no longer hunt. Our good friend Chowder is much more interested in using cameras with long-range lenses to actually get the shot. A number of other people who we've talked to from time to time have made their way over here. We've had long conversations about that. My good friend Peter Stark as well. Only hunts in the wilderness when he is actually in the wilderness and there are no other options remaining. A lot of folks are making that move. A lot of our listeners do believe in gun culture. They do believe in in responsible hunting. There's nothing responsible about what we're talking about today. Eduardo Gonçalves is joining us this morning, and there is too much disturbing information collected by that best-selling author to cover in just one book. So his publisher decided to create a Trophy Hunters trilogy of books. They repackaged the material into 20 elephants in 75 minutes, shoot one lion, get one free, and mainlining on heroin. Our guest joined Safari Club International, the world's biggest trophy hunting organizations, to find out why trophy hunters kill big game animals and what they really think about it. He is a remarkable writer, and I can't encourage you guys enough to make your way over to his WordPress site, edgoncalves.wordpress.com. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome to the show, and hopefully a new friend, Eduardo Gonçalves. Good morning to you, sir, and how are you today?
Very good morning. Well, thank you very much for having me on. Yes, it's a lovely day here over in England. Nice sunny day.
And by the way, you are one of the jokes we make is somebody said, "How do you guys get so many guests from England?" And I said, "Well, we're on so early in the morning. We tend to actually be able to get the British contributors a lot easier because it isn't as early in the morning for them as it is for everybody else here." Can we, and we'll kind of unpack a lot of your bona fides as well throughout the course of the conversation, but can you talk about going not behind it, I don't want to even call it behind enemy lines, but embedding yourself with these big game hunters to get a sense of this world, because I think it's so important. Empathy is not sympathy, and empathy and sympathy is not compassion, but you had to get a certain level of empathy to kind of understand the angle from which you were writing. Can you talk about that?
Yes, that's right. So as you said, I joined Safari Club International, and together with a colleague of mine, we contacted a lot of trophy hunters. We contacted the CEOs of companies that sell and organize trophy hunting holidays. We corresponded, spoke on the phone, we met up, we visited their trophy rooms, went to the workshops of the taxidermists that they use. We visited the hunting estates that they lease. And the purpose really was to try to, if you like, get inside the minds of trophy hunters and the people involved in the industry. So it wasn't just talking about what they've done, but it was also trying to find out how it makes them feel. And so the books are very much written in their own words. So there's sort of not that much writing from me. There's quite a lot of their own words in there. And it was an extraordinary journey. We met, for example, I spoke to a trophy hunter who was telling me about the adrenaline rush that he got from shooting the African Big Five. So that's lions and elephants and leopards and rhinos and buffaloes. Another one he said he cried with joy when he shot an elephant. We went into the trophy room of a guy who he hunted with his daughter and had 500 animals in his trophy room, including a polar bear. There were guys who told me about how they have a few beers in the evening, shoot monkeys out of trees. Another one said he had an obsession with shooting monkeys. We visited the estates where you can shoot elephants and giraffes, and showed us where the rhinos were. And the CEO joked about how he shot a giraffe because he thought it was gay.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff just lands like a ton of bricks. And like I said, I don't know. I've read your stuff. I don't know where you stand on some things, but there are people that we know on a personal level. I'm not a hunter myself. I don't care for it at all anymore. But I did want to kind of ask you: did you find anybody in this space where you were like, I don't agree with you, but at the same time, you don't strike me as that's sociopathic? Was there anybody in your adventures and your journeys where you kind of said, "Look, I this is not my thing. I think this is morally reprehensible, but you don't strike me as that kind of." There's something sinister about that, because basically what they're telling you is, I want to murder people at some level. I mean, there is a sense of that. Am I wrong there?
They're a real mix of people, and even their professional backgrounds. I was quite surprised to learn just how many doctors are trophy hunters. So two of the world's top trophy hunters, so one of the most prizes with Safari Club International, are both doctors, medical doctors. And, in the UK, again, the same thing. I was, came across a gynecologist and a transplant surgeon who are prolific trophy hunters. There was one guy who particularly fascinated me. I mean, for all sorts of reasons, quite a complex individual. But he's shot over 4,000 animals, including 1,300 elephants, 340 lions. He shot hundreds of leopards and rhinos. He's even shot a pair of gorillas. But he insisted, he was quite adamant, that he only hunted in moderation, which I thought was quite an extraordinary thing. But he also said some things that I did agree with. So he's never put his name forward for the industry prizes. So Safari Club International offers a lot of awards for people who shoot lots and lots of animals. So things like the Hunting Achievement Award, where at the top level you have to shoot animals from 125 different species. If you want to win its World Conservation Hunting Award, you have to shoot about 530 animals, and so on. But he'd never put his name forward for any of these. And he sort of criticized those who did. And he also criticized hunters who like to use novel weapons. So again, Safari Club International offers awards to trophy hunters who shoot big game animals with novel weapons. So, for example, with crossbows and revolvers. And indeed, you can get your name into the record book of Safari Club International if you shoot something like a hippopotamus with an air gun. And he was very critical of that. And in fact, he described an incident that he'd witnessed of where a rhino is being shot by a trophy hunter with a revolver in order to win a special award. And of course, it's very difficult to shoot a rhino at the best of times. They've got very thick skin. And with a revolver, it just didn't have the firepower. And he was describing the scene where there was blood spurting everywhere. He said, look, this rhino looks like a stuck pig. And he also said a few other things that I found myself agreeing with. So he says, look, there's a lot of problem animals out there, but a lot of those problem animals are caused by trophy hunters. It's not just that we've gone and shot big animals out of their herds and populations, but there are an awful lot of really bad shot trophy hunters. You don't have to have any certificates or show any aptitude. And they're generally shooting from a long way away for their own safety. So you've got a lot of animals out there that have got bullets, literally bullets embedded in them. And so they're in absolute agony. And so, yeah, they're going to be bad-tempered. Yes, they're going to, if they meet a human, they're probably going to act aggressively. And he said, this is actually largely the fault of trophy hunters. And I found myself agreeing with him on that.
Yeah, and that kind of becomes the moment of revelation where you realize this is one of the things that I kind of, as I began to kind of go through your information, is this is a rich man's game. Let's make this really clear too. This is not feral hogs in Texas that are rapidly overpopulating. This is not a situation where you have issues with population control in certain counties or countries where literally animals are starving to death. This is literally, I made the comment, and like I said, you're welcome to disagree with me, push back, but where what we're talking about here is something is beautiful, something is rare. I am going to go get a gun because I can afford it and join this club because I can afford the travel, I can afford all the accoutrements of the trip, and this really is a rich man's game we're talking about, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, if you're going to shoot a lion in the wild, for example, you've got to pay about $50,000 in the trophy fee and for accommodation and trackers fees and all the rest of it. And then you've got to pay, say, another $5,000 for the taxidermy job. Then you're going to pay another couple of $1,000 for it to be shipped home back to your trophy room. And then if you want it to go to be measured to see if it's eligible for the record book, you've got to pay for an official measurer to do that, to measure the boiled skull from top to bottom and then from side to side. And then you've got to pay to have that animal submitted to the record book. And if you want it to go towards one of the many awards that Safari Club offers, then there's an application fee. And if it's then entered, then there's a listing fee. If you want to pick up one of the statuettes or the plaques or whatever, again, you've got to pay about $3,000 or $4,000 for one of those. And then if you want to get one of these cumulative awards at the international gala that it holds every year, then again, you're paying. So absolutely. And don't forget, you've got people who have shot hundreds and in cases, thousands thousands of animals and have got those animals in their trophy rooms. There was one guy who we came across, and he said, "Look, I've actually lost count of the number of animals I've shot, but it's in the thousands." And you're right; these are this has got nothing to do with subsistence hunting. These people aren't shooting a lion or a giraffe or an elephant because they need to eat it. It's not for the meat. It is purely for pleasure. It's for a photo opportunity. It's for vanity. It's for all of those things. And yes, you've got to be extremely wealthy to do that.
One of the reasons why, when Claire Marie reached out to do the booking is that they know, as my programmer, that one of my favorite books of all time is Romain Gary's The Roots of Heaven. And in reading that, and then in reading White Hunter, Black Heart, the fictionalized account of John Huston's journey to becoming actually against the killing of elephants as well as other big giant game, I wanted to ask you, just to kind of let our listeners know too, there is an ecological disaster going on here too, not just a health and safety issue for human beings as well, because like you said, a very, very savage animal walking around with metal that has been put there by a human being causing immense pain is not going to be predisposed towards liking humans in general. Mm-hmm. But this is really, they also are having incredibly destructive effects on the ecology and the ecosystems of the environments they're going into, correct?
Well, the trophy hunters are certainly having an extraordinary impact. I mean, wildlife in general is already in a situation of crisis. I used to work for the World Wildlife Fund, and one of the things I was kind of tangentially involved in is a production of a report called the Living Planet Report that comes out every 2 years and which says what wildlife populations are doing around the world. So the last report, which came out last year in 2024, said that wildlife populations globally have fallen by about 70% since the 1970s. That's an extraordinary situation. But then if you look at the animals that trophy hunters are shooting, the figures are even worse. I mean, let's pick up the example of lions. And we know about lions because obviously Cecil was killed by Walter Palmer, that Minnesota dentist, 10 years ago. And so lion populations in the 1970s, they were around about 200,000. There's a study that's just come out, published by a charity called LionAid, and it calculates the remaining lion population to be in the vicinity of 13,500. So that's a collapse of around about 95%. If you look at leopards, again, a very, very popular animal amongst trophy hunters, despite the fact that they're in Appendix 1 of CITES, which is the international treaty which supposedly protects endangered wildlife from trade and so on. It is a very popular animal, and they've fallen by about 95% perhaps even as well. And it's right across the board. And, one of the problems, I think, actually, with the way that the Cecil story was reported 10 years ago is it felt as if it was being told as something that happens once in a blue moon. Now, since Cecil was shot 10 years ago, trophy hunters have shot another 10,000 lions, and we're now in the situation where there's 13,500 lions. And trophy hunters are shooting tens of thousands of animals, many of them endangered species, every year. For example, polar bears and rhinos and elephants and giraffes. So it is making what's already a bad situation even worse.
Yeah, and like I said, that moment of silence wasn't a lack of questions I have. I just wanted to let that land. And by the way, I think about this stuff, of course, because the majority of our listeners are over-the-road truckers, and I want to go back to the rich man's point as well, too. You're talking about sometimes in areas that really don't need any more gasoline, any more rolling trucks, a whole lot of stuff that's being introduced there that's damaging wildlife, that is actually, having an impact on the people who live in those areas, sometimes going places where no one should be going other than to enjoy and visit. Like I said, the macro, which you've just talked about, is devastating, but it's having all kinds of awful effects on the micro levels, on the communities. It's making some of these communities dependent upon this as, tourist dollars and trade dollars, not diversifying economies. Like I said, you're always welcome to say, that's not kind of it, Jimmy Mack, but am I on to something here?
Well, I think so. And it's interesting that although, yes, the US, if you like, has more of a gun culture or a hunting culture than some other countries, the vast majority of people in the US are opposed to trophy hunting, to what we're talking about. Because it's not culling, it's not wildlife management, it's not subsistence hunting or food hunting. It is purely a trophy hunting, something for a selfie and a souvenir, and for sport, and for no other reason. And yet, so polls have shown that over 80% of people in the US are opposed to trophy hunting. And we think about, what could we do instead? Well, there's lots of alternatives. You can engage in, for example, photo safaris and nature tourism, and that has the benefit of generating a lot more money for conservation, and a lot more money goes into the local community. So there was a study, for example, in South Africa that says if there was photo safaris there instead of trophy hunting, you create about 11 times as many jobs for people in these poor, rural communities. And we can see, for example, if you compare Kenya and Tanzania, two countries that are side by side and have got cross-border populations of wildlife. So Kenya banned trophy hunting in the 1970s. Now, the photographic safari industry now contributes 15% of the country's GDP. It's $1 billion that are coming in every year as a result of nature tourism. And it's not just meaning that wildlife is preserved, it's also benefiting local people. So every child, for example, of the Maasai tribe is now able to access a high school education. And Kenya is pretty much the only country in Africa where lion populations, elephant populations, and rhino populations are on the increase. Whereas if you look next door in Tanzania, I mean, over a quarter of the country, 26% of that country, is covered by hunting estates for trophy hunting, yet they generate only 0.03% of the country's GDP. And the wildlife populations there are going down and down.
It's interesting, too, by the way. We're joined, by the way, the studio over here in the city of New Orleans, Eduardo, is actually sponsored by Fastport. Its president, who often takes the ride with me on these shows, is with me. He recently, and one of the reasons why he is sitting in on this, and he's going to sit in on the next one, too, because we're talking to Chef Irvine next after this, is that he actually had the experience you're talking about, the positive experience of going on a safari in South Africa, right, Brad?
Yeah, it was a bicycle safari. Over the course of 8 days total, counting the travel. But you would ride in the morning on mountain bikes, get to see all of the wildlife, do a traditional game safari in the afternoon that was a photography-based safari, not trophy hunting for sure. But it was interesting. This was managed by a group called the Kariega Foundation. It's a nonprofit that works with a game reserve there in South Africa. And their guiding philosophy is conservation through community. And we got to witness that. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but they're doing things to partner with neighboring communities. They're training people at the high school level to become part of their anti-poaching units. And it's that sustainable conservation is best achieved when those communities see those tangible benefits. So the money they're making from the safaris like the ones I went on are being reinvested back into the communities, to his point.
Yeah, and Eduardo, I wanted to kind of throw this your way too, because you've actually graciously are actually on longer than we actually had a lot of time for. I know you're an incredibly busy man, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about, we've got a lot of listeners out there, over-the-road truck drivers. Many of them are passionate gun owners, do subsistence hunting, do population control hunting, but like you said, many of them in the chat this morning were talking about how they would love to go on a safari provided it actually was only involving cameras, that the only shots were coming from their cameras. Tell them what they can do to get involved to create pressure on the people over here and in Europe who are turning this into playgrounds of murder. What they can do, because their voices actually have more impact in this sphere than a lot of people who you would think would be instinctively opposed. These guys and gals have a real chance to bring pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. I've spoken to quite a few deer hunters in the U.S. who passionately support our campaign to stop trophy hunting, because they see and understand that we're talking about two very, very different things. And the thing I would say is get in touch with your elected representative. Tell them that this is important to you and that your vote, if you like, the next election depends on how that representative is going to act on this. There is legislation, in fact, going through the House of Representatives, but I know that members of Congress will want to know how their constituents feel about it. And the best way to do that is to call them, is to write a letter, put it in an envelope, lick a stamp and send it on to them, or to go and see them, face to face and say, hey, listen, this is a really important issue to me, and how I vote in the midterms or at the next elections, whatever, is going to, I'm looking to see what you're going to say and do, because at the end of the day, these are magnificent animals. This is part of our shared natural heritage as a human race, and we've got to do whatever we can to protect them. There is nothing to be gained. There's nothing positive about shooting a captive bred lion or an innocent elephant or a giraffe purely for fun.
So I'm curious about something. You mentioned earlier the percentage of Americans who are against trophy hunting, not conservation management. How does that compare to the UK?
It's interesting that the figures are pretty much identical everywhere in the world. So we've done polls in the UK. We know of polls that have been done in other European countries. There's even been polls done in Southern Africa. So generally speaking, you're talking about 8 out of 10 people everywhere in the world are opposed to trophy hunting. So it doesn't matter where you are, how old you are, what class you're from, what your profession is. None of that matters. It seems that there is, if you like, a vast majority of people who have got decent human values and who agree that killing a beautiful, majestic and defenseless animal purely for entertainment is just plain wrong.
Eduardo Gonçalves has joined us this morning. Go to goncalves.wordpress.com. A lot of great content over there. Britain's Trophy Hunters, by the way. You can actually check out the trailer on YouTube, Britain's Trophy Hunters. Just type that in, put it all in quotes, and the YouTube trailer will come up. Eduardo, you are welcome back anytime there's a breakthrough, anytime you've got a new book. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for making the time across the pond over here. We're in the city of New Orleans. You're in the city of London. It's a great international connection, and we feel like we made a new friend here today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.